Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Coming up on this episode of the Entrepreneurial You.
For an entrepreneur to be successful requires an insane amount of focus and then alignment, getting people around you that share your purpose, share your vision, share your values. That's really important. Getting everybody on the same page, it's an absolute requirement for a healthy growth pattern. It has to happen from the top of the company to the bottom.
Hey, it's John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and it's the Entrepreneurial You, the show for dedicated and passionate Caribbean entrepreneurs seeking daily inspiration, brought to you by author, speaker, and award-winning entrepreneur Heneka Watkis-Porter. You must be prepared to ignite.
Welcome to another inspiring episode of the Entrepreneurial You podcast. And it's a show that equips you with the mindset, the strategies, and the tools that you need to lead, you need to grow, and succeed both in business and in life. So I'm your host, Heneka Watkis-Porter, and today we do have an extraordinary guest who is a master in leadership, transformation, and entrepreneurial success. Joining us today is Robert White, a dynamic speaker, author, leadership trainer, and executive mentor with a deep passion for integrating heart-centered leadership with real-world business success. With over 1.3 million graduates from the companies he has founded, Robert brings unparalleled experience in guiding entrepreneurs and business leaders toward growth, impact, and transformation. So if you've ever wondered how to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, overcome executive challenges and build a truly executive team, then absolutely without a doubt, this episode is for you. So get ready for the very powerful conversation that will reshape how you approach leadership and success right here on the Entrepreneurial You. Welcome, Robert White.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be with you. I love your enthusiasm for being an entrepreneur.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, what can I say after being for so long, right? It's kind of like in my DNA. Thank you, Robert. I appreciate that. So to my peak performers, let me just kind of bring you into what we're talking about today. We're looking at the heart of leadership, how to build an entrepreneurial mindset for lasting success. And this is against the backdrop that entrepreneurial success isn't just about strategy and execution. It's about mindset. It's about leadership. The most effective leaders aren't just results driven. They are transformational. They are blending emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and resilience to navigate today's complex business landscape. So today, it's such an honor that I'm going to be sitting down with Robert White. Yeah, sitting across from him in this StreamYard room, usually Zoom, but today it's StreamYard. He's a seasoned mentor who has helped, as I said in the intro, 1.3 million people worldwide develop leadership skills and create sustainable business success. So he's going to show us entrepreneurs and leaders and executives how to cultivate this entrepreneurial mindset, how to build high-performing teams and lead not just with strategy, but with heart to create an impact that is lasting, an impact that outlives us. So welcome again, Robert, and I have an icebreaker question for you. Can I go ahead?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
You've mentored thousands of business leaders. If you could go back and give advice to your younger self when you were starting out, what would that advice be?
There are a lot of different approaches to that and a lot of different ways to answer a very good question. There are some basics that any good coach, good mentor would say to answer that. And I think they would revolve around attitudes, habits, and behaviors. So if I could give advice to that 20-year-old, it would be around attitudes, habits, and behaviors. So that's kind of some basics. I think probably many of your listeners have done some work on their attitudes and their habits and behaviors. If they haven't, then they need to do that. There are great books about it, hopefully, including mine. And there's a lot of information available online, and certainly coaches work around an improvement in attitudes, habits, and behaviors. The part that I think I might add today to that is some aspects of character that go beyond that basic outline of attitudes, habits, and behaviors. And the first one is to have a single-minded focus. Now, I acknowledge there are a lot of things that can take us away from that kind of single-minded focus. That things from our history, from our childhood, previous success, previous failure, blame, shame, regret, guilt, all of those personal qualities can take away from the single-minded focus, this consciousness and an application of strategic intent for your business. My, claim to fame in terms of being a mentor is I've been there and done that. I've founded 3 training companies that have 1,300,000 graduates of these high-impact leadership experiences. I've also founded a publishing company. I've done a lot of different things and a lot of learning along the way, both from some success that, frankly, I didn't expect that much success, but also some failure that I certainly didn't expect, which has been my biggest learning experience. And in our culture change work, working with corporations, using experiential trainings and coaching, it was satisfying, it was profitable. The companies were delighted. But what got in the way for me at that particular time in my life, as I had semi-retired to Aspen, Colorado, I built a big house, I bought a jet. I had 2 birth children and 2 adopted special needs kids. I skied 80 days a year. My Aspen lifestyle created conflicts with my time and my attention, and my results in my business plummeted. They crashed. And I had to re-engage. And I learned that what we had done because of my inattention, because I didn't have that single-minded focus that had built my business, that allowed me to move to Aspen and all of that wealth, I stopped doing what worked. So I learned that we drifted into doing what clients wanted instead of staying true to our knowledge and experience on what was actually needed. So that was the focus. That's how the focus or lack of focus showed up, as we started just listening to the client instead of the deep dive into looking at what was really going on in that company and how could we really make a difference. We kind of had to take our own medicine. And we had to have a few people leave our company that were not aligned to that. And that brings me to point number 2, which is the need for alignment. When you start a new company, I've noticed with other entrepreneurs, quite often, you've got to start adding some people. You've got to get beyond the one man or one woman gang and start creating a team. And what we tend to do is create people that are close to us, that are easier for us to enroll. And yet, quite often, what we discover later, and this has happened to me, is we find out that these same people that might be wonderful people and very talented people, and yet they are actually not aligned to our purpose, our vision, and our values. And that need for alignment, getting everybody on the same page, it's an absolute requirement for a healthy growth pattern. And it has to happen from the top of the company to the bottom. But in the early days for an entrepreneur is to pay rigorous attention, to become a rigorous truth teller about your current story, your current reality. The Buddhists have a great expression. They call it developing a selfless regard for reality. In other words, getting your ego out of the way, getting past relationships out of the way, getting any insecurity that you have. At one point when I was younger, I tended to go try to find people that were very, very strong in areas I was very, very weak. But, if you hold yourself as very, very weak, you don't do a very good job of choosing people. You're kind of desperate. And so I think for an entrepreneur to be successful requires an insane amount of focus and then alignment, getting people around you that share your purpose, share your vision, share your values. That's really important because that's going to be the key to lasting success. And then finally, in the work that I've done with entrepreneurs, what I realize is that the successful people, and let's remember, many, many entrepreneurs fail. I'm not being negative here. I'm just pointing out reality. And to succeed, you need to have an insane, unreasonable commitment to what you're doing. I grew up in abject poverty, an alcoholic father who died when I was 14, and a very angry and negative and violent mother. That's my story. One of my friends said they should make a movie of my life, but I think only my family would go to the movie, so let's not do that. But you know what I learned from my mother, even though she seemed to not like children very much, and especially didn't like me. But what I learned from her after I got over the hurt and the bad memories was that commitment is everything. My mother was widowed 3 times, my father being the 3rd husband that died. And I never heard a sad story from her about anything. She never played the victim role. She just dealt with life. She got, that expression, when she was knocked down, she got up off the floor. And that's how she lived. She didn't preach it. She didn't teach it. But her example has been with me all of my life. And what it tells me is she was committed to our family. Now, it showed up in some strange ways sometimes, but we were always fed. We were always had a roof over our heads. We had clothing to wear even when she had to make it. And she was committed. And it was actually unreasonable. She could have easily descended into being a ward of the state, perhaps, or into drugs or alcohol. And she did none of those things. She went to work every day. And she was an incredible model for my life, even though I can tell some terrible stories about her. And I think that kind of commitment, that's what it takes when you launch an entrepreneurial adventure.
Yeah. Robert, my peak performers are wondering, so that's just the icebreaker, right? But we've delved right into it, and it's okay. It's okay because it all connected. And I wasn't going to stop you because you were on a roll. You clearly have started to define the entrepreneurial mindset, even without my asking about that. And I just think that's brilliant. Why is having this entrepreneurial mindset essential for success?
First of all, we have to recognize that you are an exception. If you want to develop an entrepreneurial mindset, you are an exception. Our culture everywhere in the world is generally a victim culture, as an example of that. It's not supportive of people that go off and do their own thing. It's supportive of people that get a job, go to work every day at the same time, come home at the same time. That's seems to be the culture that's more supported by others. But if you make the entrepreneurial choice, it means you're going to have to shift a lot of things about your mindset, about your outlook on life, the story you tell about yourself, about, as an example, becoming rich. There are a lot of stories around about how rich people are terrible. And you have to act against those kinds of cultural beliefs that are so common. We are social beings, human beings. We want to be liked. We want to be approved of. And when the culture doesn't approve of something that we're so excited about, that's a tough thing to overcome. Keeping your head clear and focused and aligned and committed, that's the key. It's simple, actually. It's just not easy.
Mm-hmm. I listened to your story. I listened to you, talk about overcoming and just even the lessons your mom taught you without verbally expressing it. For you, life could have gone any other way based on your circumstance? Why did it not?
I can't answer that. And I'm not a particularly religious person, even though I do hold my faith as central to my life, but I don't talk about it a lot. Yet when I look at myself and my history, I mean, it has not been a smooth road. I've messed up a lot of times, but overall, it's worked out quite amazingly, more than I ever dreamed of. But I look at people with similar backgrounds to mine, of poverty, of abuse, of failure, of I had 3 heart attacks at 19, 21, and 23 years old. I was told I was going to die by 35. And yet, I've more than doubled that in terms of lifespan. So, I mean, I can tell a story about why I should have retreated from life. And I look at, and there are many people that have even worse backgrounds than me, far worse, that are highly successful. But I also know those that have, in fact, retreated from life, that have become victims, in effect, wards of the state, of the government, or descended into drugs and alcohol, really horrible stories. And I wonder, I actually don't have an answer to that question, is it because I don't know exactly why. I know the decision I made. I was 7 or 8 years old. I was sent to school in clothing that was made from feed sacks. The things like rice and wheat and flour and sugar all came in these cloth bags. And in the situation we were in, my mother made my clothing and my brothers and sisters. Our clothing was made from those cloth bags. And that was like a signal to the rest of our community that we were poor. And I remember going to school and being teased and being bullied at that age, and getting in fights. And what occurred to me is, I will do whatever is necessary to never be poor again. Now, the therapist or the people in neurolinguistic programming and all of these experts will tell you that that's a negative purpose, but it empowered me for many, many years. I'll never be poor again. And for me, what happened was, I ended up in this beautiful home in Aspen with 7 servants and all of this, the signs of wealth. And yet I started waking up and skiing 80 days a year and traveling with the late John Denver, the American singer and songwriter and activist. I mean, I had an amazing life. I started waking up thinking, God is not finished with me, that there's something that's missing. And what I discovered, it's also part of the subtitle of my book, is that what was missing in my life was joy and satisfaction. I had all the money. I had learned how to do that, and I was reasonably good at it. But it was an incomplete life. And a lot of that was based on how I grew up. I needed to do some work on completing my past, on letting go of negative energy and defensiveness and all of those things that come with that kind of background. I got through enough of them because I was so driven to never be poor again. But what I needed to do was have a more positive purpose, and one that allowed me to experience fun and joy and aliveness and relationships in a way that I had never before. So I think the process never stops. I mean, the learning and growth, if you're not learning and growing with the fast pace of change in our society today, you're falling behind.
And you're dying. So I suspect your journey has a lot to do with why you also emphasize heart-centered leadership, but you also focus too on strategy-driven leadership. How do you marry the two, really?
That's another great question. And I think it's having a compelling vision that includes all of those so-called soft experiences. And it's not about balance. I think balance is a dangerous word, frankly. It's more about integrating your career and your family and your faith and your hobbies, your interests, and somehow combining the two. If we talk about balance, I have a really messed up knee, and I've had 4 surgeries on it. I spent a lot of time in full leg casts, resting it. I've done all these things for it. And what you get from that is each time you have the surgery, you have to go do rehabilitation, getting the muscles and tendons and nerves firing again and strong again. And I can tell you, it's a wonderful thing, and these people are very skilled. Basically, what they do is they hurt you so they can help you. I've always thought, what an interesting job that is. And by the way, if you haven't done that, what you can expect with the good ones is they know their stuff about the body and how to make it stronger, but they also know how to tell a joke, how to get you laughing, how to distract you while they cause you to do all these painful things. But the part of the rehab that had the most impact on me in terms of my growth and development as a human being is the balance board. There's a round cylinder, and then a board goes on top of that cylinder, and you have to balance on it back and forth. And it's just so difficult, and you fall a lot and fail a lot in order to get to the place. But that's kind of a very important part of rehab, is to get those nerves firing again and getting them to be responsive so that you can walk without falling, as an example, or go back to being in a sport that you love, like in my case, like skiing. But the key is balance is very, very difficult. The body fights against it. The mind fights against it. And then you get into this conflict where you think that if I'm going to be successful, I have to ignore my family, or I'm going to ignore my family and I'm just going to put up with being less successful in my business. So I've been on both sides of that equation. And my recommendation is look at what do you really want and integrate those things into each other. Include your family in your business, include your business in your family, and it's not intuitive in my experience. You kind of have to fight against negative beliefs that you have about that. But the key is to realize that a broad, heart-centered life is where joy and satisfaction come from, and that you need to pay some attention to that as well as the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. All right. So when you look at what you've accomplished, clearly you couldn't have done it alone. Effective leadership means that you have an effective team. What are some of the key ingredients to building high impact, highly engaged teams?
Wow. You're getting me an award today for great questions.
I'll accept. I'll take it. Thank you.
That's one of my favorite, actually a favorite question. Not easy. It's simple. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. You have to do some foundational work first, in my experience. And this comes from a major failure in my life and what I learned from it. And also from some mentors and coaches where I was the student, not the teacher. The foundation work that needs to be done before you create a high performing team is work on yourself in terms of your purpose, your vision, your values, and your strategic intent. What is it you're committed to producing this month, this year, this 5 years? But the big work begins with your purpose and your organizational purpose, which has to match yours as the entrepreneur. And purpose is the unique reason that you're alive, the unique reason that your company exists. What is it that's additive in the world? What is it that no one else can do as good as you can do it, with as much passion as you have for it, with as much commitment as you can bring to it? So the first step is to do the hard work of figuring out your purpose. And what I realized in looking back is I've had a series of purposes. The first one, that one I just mentioned, which is the negatively based purpose. I'll never be poor again. I built several very successful companies and became very, very rich with that. But there was some things missing from it. What I realized in my semi-retirement in Aspen, Colorado, was that I had drifted into a purpose of, I'm just a rich guy in Aspen. And that's embarrassing to admit that. But, being on 6 nonprofit boards, running around the world in my own airplane, and the big house, and, all of those things were expressions of that new purpose. And I learned a lot from it. I'm not putting it down. I met some amazing people that are dear friends today. Yet it was also not the one that was rewarding and satisfying to me ultimately. It was like a short-term high. And then I did some work on me, and the work on me resulted in my purpose today, which is I have two. One is to contribute, that to be way beyond survival or way beyond maintenance, way beyond play, to actually contribute in my life, in my family, in my business, in my community. That everything that I do, I want to have grounded in contribution. Now, it doesn't matter in my experience, it doesn't matter what your purpose is, as long as you know what it is and that you're acting in integrity to fulfill it. So that's the first step, is know your purpose. The second piece is to have a compelling vision. And this is not a goal. I think there's a lot of confusion about that. A vision is a picture that is so compelling that it attracts people. It attracts customers. And in answer to your question, it attracts the right people that want to work with you because they share your vision and they can get past temporary upsets, temporary failures, because they're committed with you toward creating something wonderful, something that really serves humanity, hopefully, that gets you rich, that just brings you joy and satisfaction and fulfillment. But those are the kind of people that you're looking for, people that kind of wired up the way you are, and that compelling vision. The word compelling is what's really important. It's one that draws people in. It brings them close to you and produces that piece called alignment. And then what are your values? Some people have, like 20 values in a value statement. I have 5. What are your core values? What is it that, if violated, causes you to go absolutely 100% to eliminate that from your life? In my case, what I learned, not because in theory, but in reality, is I hired somebody to be the CEO of one of my companies. And he was incredibly talented. I mean, he had been a customer of ours on the corporate culture change side of things. He had run a huge organization, much bigger than mine, very successfully. And I just thought he'd be the best ever hire in my entire lifetime. And it turned out to be a disaster because his style was abusive. He did not demonstrate respect for other human beings. And that showed up in all kinds of ways. What I learned about it for me, first of all, I could see it didn't work. So that was I guess that's not a learning. I knew that. But what I learned is that I had a deeply held value around respect.
I could tell, even without you sharing that that's one of your core values, it shows up in the way in your approach, in your communication with me. And it's not you just being professional. I could tell the difference between being professional and being respectful.
Well, that word foundational is, it rolls off the lips. It's just a word. But, if you use the metaphor of building a home, what do you pay attention to first? It's the foundation. If it's off, you're going to have cracks in your walls and you're going to have leaking when the big rain comes, right? It's foundation. The foundation comes first. And for me, what's foundational are your values, because it gives you a filter that you can look through in making decisions about people, like the subject of your question. How do you choose your people? You better find people that are aligned to your purpose, vision, and especially your values. And one thing, I'm in the training business. The American humorist and writer Will Rogers said that never ask a barber if you need a haircut. You're always going to get the same answer, yes. But if that is not values based, then sometimes you're getting a haircut when you really didn't need one. And you need people around you that fudging the numbers, as an example, manipulating the numbers in the company, that they just wouldn't do that because their value is that we have to operate with integrity. But there are people that do that. And if you attract people around you like that, who have different values than you have, then you're headed for conflict.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. We're going to take a break right here, Robert, and I'm going to do the community connection segment, and then we're going to come back and we're going to wrap. Of course, you know, my peak performers in the segment, you're invited to share your reviews, your feedback, your questions, whatever you want to share to engage. And today, again, I'm sharing another podcast review, and it comes from Dr. Don McDonald out of Canada. This podcast is full of great tips and pointers to help you live the life you've always wanted. I recommend you take a listen. Great job. Thank you so much, Dr. Don McDonald. It's a pleasure to have you send in your reviews. And if it is that you are interested in sharing a review, please go on Apple and go on Spotify and leave a review. Of course, you can, your rating on Spotify, because you can't review on Spotify, but just leave a rating and leave a review on Apple. Thank you so much, Dr. Don. Again, I appreciate you. All right. Oh, gosh. This conversation I've been having with Robert White is pure delight. It's pure gem. We have to wrap. No, we have to wrap. I'm going to ask you, as it is, we've been talking about the entrepreneurial mindset. We're talking about heart-centered leadership with strategy-driven approaches as well, building high-performing teams. What is your last word on the subject matter, Robert? Go ahead and share. And you may also share your contact details as well.
You know, it's hard for me to answer a 3-day seminar question simply, and I apologize for that. But I think the biggest thing is continued learning, to wake up, to have a higher level of awareness. And what it takes, frankly, is to read that book that everybody is talking about and look at it. Is it true for you? To go to that seminar that somebody recommends to you. Do things to shake yourself up and to have this kind of continued learning, because our world's changing so fast. And to keep up with it requires you learning a lot more than what you got from conventional schooling.
Well said. And you managed to keep it very succinct. Great job. How can our community reach you, Robert?
The best way is through my website, extraordinarypeople.com. My gift to your listeners is that I've been writing an e-zine, a once-a-week email called An Extraordinary Minute. I've been doing it for 17 years every week. It's an idea that I'm learning about. It might come from a book, might come from a video, from a seminar that I've attended, and then my thoughts about it, all designed to be read in 1 minute or less. And so it's like a little snack, a mental snack once a week. It's free. All you need to do is register at extraordinarypeople.com. You'll also receive a 28-page essay that I've written and rewritten and edited and hopefully improved for many years. You get it automatically. It's a download. You can share it with your people, with your colleagues, with your families. It's totally shareable. A lot of people say that it's life-changing. You know, we'll see, but it's free. And finally, if you're interested in my book, Living an Extraordinary Life, it's now a bestseller. I'm very proud of it. People rave about it, and I'm delighted. So that's on Amazon and all those. If you want a signed copy, you can do it on my website.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that, Robert. I'm going to move into trending now. And trending now, leadership is evolving, and research shows that emotional intelligence is now considered more critical than IQ for executive success. According to a study by Harvard Business Review, 90% of top-performing executives have high emotional intelligence with skills like self-awareness, empathy, adaptability, driving both business performance and team management. So as companies navigate rapid technological change, remote work challenges, and shifting workforce expectations, leaders who integrate heart-centered leadership with data-driven decision-making are emerging as the true game changers as in business. So that's what's trending now. And you've heard me say it before. Again, I have to thank Robert White for such an insightful, transformative conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. You are phenomenal, Robert. I appreciate you for coming.
It's been my great pleasure, and I'm attracted by your commitment and your enthusiasm for what you're doing. So maybe we can find something to do together in the future.
Oh, absolutely. We're having a conversation shortly after that. So leadership is not just about strategy. It's about mindset, emotional intelligence, and creating impact. So if today's episode resonated with you, take action. Apply these principles in your business and on your leadership journey. Thank you so much for tuning into the Entrepreneurial You. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do not keep it to yourself. Share it with somebody else. Tell somebody else about it, like it, review it, leave a rating, all of these things. And you know what was interesting when Robert spoke about, the purpose, the why. It's so timely because I wanted to share my Find Your Why workshop, which is actually based on Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So if you're interested to find your why, please reach out to me, HenekaWatkis-Porter.com. Send me a message on social media, and we create a Find Your Why workshop for your organization, right? So affirm with me, and you know I love my affirmations. I am a transformational leader combining heart, strategy, and vision to create lasting success. I embrace challenges as opportunities, and I lead with courage and purpose. Thanks so much for tuning in again. And of course, this episode is sponsored by the Jamaica Stock Exchange and HenekaWatkis-Porter.com. Do take care. Do take care.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.